Would you mind terribly if I were to introduce our next presenters? Thank you ever so much. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Gene and Mike Poore, discussing the illusion of life, which I suppose that's what I am.
It's always a tradition to kiss an animatronic when he comes on cue. Not on the lips, just the way he is. And so he got his cue right, so we're going to go along with it. I've always been fascinated by machines my whole life. And somebody reminded me before I came out here, that's about 500 in dog years. And in my early years, I played around with Tinker Toys and Erector sets and anything I could do to create the illusion of life. And interestingly enough, for me, somewhere in my high school years, I created a bowling alley pin setter that had like 14 motors and 2 miles of wire and all these relays and steppers inside of it. And my mom, who couldn't understand why I would do this, but was very permissive, brought somebody over and said, what do you think? And they said, your son's pretty creative. And I just giggled about that because I felt I've never had an original idea in my life. I've stolen all my ideas. But I operate under the theory that if you steal from one person, that's theft, that's plagiarism, that's not legal. But if you steal from many people, that's research. And so basically, I spent a good chunk of my life in the last 30 years now developing animatronic characters. And these are two of the characters that we've recently done about 30 years ago, and you can see that they were pretty primitive. Over those years, we've gotten better, and I've surrounded myself by some very talented people. And I'm very proud of some of the things that we've done in the last few years. But I'm mostly proud of how realistic my son looks today. So.
No, I'm not an animatronic. But I've been following my old man here around for 30-odd years. I don't like to admit that a lot in public, but I guess I will here. But I've inherited an awful lot from him. My boyish good looks, my charm. I'm just hoping I don't get the male pattern baldness out of it. But I also inherited my love of technology, my love of computers. And I'm a computer guy. I always have been since early 80s when I got my first 486. I had a Commodore. I had Mac Classic, you name it. It's now a fishbowl in my office. But we had all of the toys. But when you grow up poor, and I don't mean that in the monetary sense, but when you grow up poor, life's a little bit different. Like, take Christmas. Our Christmases were pretty normal in the sense that when we woke up, we went downstairs, we opened our presents, and we played with them for about 4 or 5 minutes. Take our Teddy Ruxpin here. After about the 4 or 5 minutes, we'd crack those bad boys open, and we'd see exactly what made them work. So they would go from a toy to spare parts for the next 15 or so years.
I wanted my kids to see what really goes on behind the scenes of all of this stuff. So these toys were still playable. I mean, you just had to put the ears back on and things of that sort. You know, we found that people, humans have always been interested in the illusion of life. And it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. And the early ones were called automata. And if you go back and look at some of these, they're absolutely amazing. There were automata that were made by watchmakers that basically could draw, they could write, they could do trapeze acts, they could do any number of things. But I was always fascinated by one that was done by a person named Vakassin. And his goal in life was really to produce an artificial man. And the closest he ever got to it was this artificial duck. And what you could do is go up to it, and you could give it a kernel of corn, and it would eat it, and then it would go down through the digestive system and work its way through until it got to the orifice where, what has to happen. Now, the interesting thing about all of these things that we've gone through is the technology of the illusion of life has improved over the years. So has the terminology. The terminology has changed, and there could be all kinds of debates of what came first and what didn't come first. But you've heard robots and butts and bots and androids and animatronics and cyborgs, but all of them basically are talking about recreating the illusion of life.
And the concept of animatronics are not new to TED. And TED has had numerous speakers talking about animatronics. For the most part, it's been research-oriented. Two great examples are Cynthia Brazel from the MIT Media Lab and David Winston from his company out in California, both of which worked with animatronics and conveying and relaying emotion from people to the machine. Now, we are not the research guys. We are not the ones who are going to be working in a lab. We are the real-world implementation people. We have put robots into real-world settings for almost 2 decades now. We actually have robots that have been in real-world settings for 15 years, run every single day, numerous times a day, with minimal to no breakdown.
Now, the interesting thing about if you're an animatronic manufacturer, you all are fans of Disney. I mean, he wrote the book about animatronics. And he not only wrote the book about animatronics, he coined the word audio animatronics, and that's why most of us who make animatronics now don't use that word. We use animatronics just to stay away from his battery of lawyers that will come after you. The interesting thing, Disney's first real opportunity of making a life-size robot was done in 1964 at the World's Fair, and I got a chance to see it. And that's probably what really motivated me to begin the process of doing the illusion of life. And a few years ago, I got a chance to do my own Lincoln. And not only did I get to do Lincoln, but I got to do his family as well.
Well, now, unfortunately, the World's Fair is no longer there. So the places where people can go and see animatronics is a lot more wide open. You can see them in museums. You can see them in trade shows. Visitor centers, anywhere where clients could want to stop customers and talk to them about their product. Now, animatronics are great for 2 very big concepts. 1, they are great at teaching, so they're good at educating. And 2, they are great for entertainment. So we've kind of coined a phrase, we call it edutainment, is exactly what animatronics are for.
The interesting thing about animatronics is that they're design-driven. No 2 animatronics are ever alike, so you don't have a stock armature that you're working from. You generally sit down with a client, you determine what you're going to be building, and you decide how many moves it's going to have, what it's going to do, what it's going to say, and then the process, you begin doing small little maquettes so that they can take a look and see what it actually is going to look like as it's done. Once that takes place then, you're going to sculpt the body, and then you're going to start the fabrication process, and then ultimately it ends up as a finished product. The interesting thing, there is always a comparison being made between an industrial robot and an animatronic. Industrial robots are always, they're judged by how precise they are because they're pick-and-place machines, where an animatronic is always judged by how believable it is in terms of the illusion of life.
And one way of conveying that illusion is through movement. Now, animatronics move using actuators. They can be moved through a number of different methods. You can use pneumatic, which is going to be air-driven, hydraulic, which is going to be some form of liquid. You're going to have electric or mechanical or a hybrid of some of those 4 together. Now, each of these moves can be broken down into 2 different categories. You can have digital moves and analog moves. Now, unlike the rest of the world, in the realm of animatronics, analog is much better than digital. Analog is a concept where you can move a character and then stop and start it anywhere along the way of the process of moving. And it can change speeds at the same time. A digital move is a concept where it's just on or off. Now, if you take Jules Verne here, he has all digital moves. And I'm going to show you exactly what it looks like. We'll show you some analog moves a little bit later. But if you just take a look at some of the digital moves, if you can see his mouth moving, if I hold down the button, it opens up. If I release it, it closes. Now, I don't have any control of stopping it midway through the move, so it takes a little bit of artistry to make it seem like it's alive. Now, if you were to slowly combine a number of these, it slowly gives you the illusion of life. Now, the concept of movement doesn't need to be overdone. You can have animatronics that have the illusion of life with a single move. Right here we have an example of Mark Twain. He had 1 move, and he was still able to give that illusion that it had come alive. On the other end of the spectrum, we have a Yeti right here who had over 170 individual moves within his body. All 170 of those could be used to convey emotion and give an illusion of life.
You know, there's a number of laws out there. Arthur Clarke has his 3 laws of predictions. Isaac Asimov has his 3 laws of robotics. I'm sure Murphy has his laws of it's going to go wrong, it can go wrong. We decided today we were going to talk to you about Poor's laws for increasing the illusion of life.
And the first of which that we really wanted to put forward was the law of distance. The law of distance is the concept that the closer the audience is to the animatronic, the more realistic the moves and the appearance have to be. And the converse is true as well. The farther away you can keep your audience, the less realistic you have to make it appear and move. Now, Disney absolutely knew this. He, in his Hall of Presidents, wouldn't let the audience within 45 feet of the animatronic, so he was able to get away with a little bit more.
Now, that's related also to the law of time. The longer that a character is on, the more you're going to be critical of it. In other words, if in this particular case, if it's in a retail store, you're going to be standing there looking at it, and you're going to be very critical of it. We generally tell the client that you've got about 5 or 6 seconds per move that you're going to have. But on the left side, with a boat, and if you're traveling by it and you're going to go by it very quickly, it's not going to be judged very quickly. You get away with a lot more.
Now, there are other ways of getting a lot more out of it, and if you increase the number of animatronics in a specific environment or scene, you fall underneath the category of the law of numbers. Now, when you add more animatronics to an environment, they're able to interact with each other. That interaction will buy you far more time and far more believability. You have the invariability that's going to be removed when you're able to control that entire environment.
Which goes to the law of non-human. We have a tendency to judge human characters much, much more critically than we do, say, a duck or a clock or an air valve, or in this particular case, a gorilla playing the drums. Not many people really know what a gorilla looks like playing the drums, so that we can get away with a lot in that particular case.
I can feel it coming in the air tonight. Oh Lord, and I've been waiting for this moment for all my life. Oh Lord, oh Lord.
Now this is one of my favorite tunes.
That leads us to the law of scale. Now, the law of scale is a concept that if you're trying to show an item that's incredibly small, blow it up to enormous proportions. And the converse, too. If you're trying to show something that's incredibly large, shrink it down into something small. Change how people expect to see something. When you do that, you get kind of the element of surprise, and they tend to buy into the reality a little bit more.
And the law of surprises is an interesting one, because here's Wadlow, which is the world's tallest man, and when you walk by him, he stands up, and that really gives a notion of scale. Another law of surprises was Garner Holt made an animatronic that actually could walk back or ride back and forth on a unicycle. Nobody could figure out how that was done.
Now, the next one is the law of personality. And the law of personality is the concept that when you first start trying to design an animatronic, you usually want to aim for a specific trait or personality element that you're trying to embed inside of the animatronic. When you do, you have a certain connection then between the audience and the animatronic that they're willing to believe more into the reality that you're trying to sell.
Which brings back to the law of edge. The law of edge is to take all the chances you can possibly do with an audience. We made a clown once that had a pelvic thrust that just threw everybody for a complete loss when they saw it. And then we also, did our series of crazy-looking characters like this that was singing, "I'm too sexy for it." Well, you fill in the blank.
The next one would be the law of celebrity. Now, the law of celebrity, most people would think that this means that it's easier to do celebrities. In fact, it's almost the other way. People have an expectation of what celebrities look like. Take Elvis, for example. He's one of the hardest characters to do. The reason for it, everyone thinks they know what Elvis looks like. But what Elvis are they thinking of? Young Elvis? Old Elvis? Memphis Elvis? Vegas Elvis? Hawaii Elvis? Who knows? And the problem is that you get so many different choices that people have an expectation. If it doesn't conform to it, they don't believe it. Now, there's one benefit you can have with a celebrity.
The first requisite for success is to develop the ability to focus and apply your mental and physical energies to the problem at hand without growing weary. I never did anything worth doing entirely by accident. Almost none of my inventions were derived in that manner. They were achieved by having trained myself to be analytical and to endure and tolerate hard work. I have far more respect for the person with a single idea who gets there than for the person with 1,000 ideas who does nothing.
Now, this is Thomas Edison. I know the question that all of you guys are thinking. It's a question that goes through every audience's mind. Boxers or briefs? Well, I can tell you right now, we're going to answer that question for you. We're going to bring Tom out here. Come on out, Tom. As you can see, he's a boxer guy.
Now, the law of programming is an interesting one in that basically they're all computer driven. And what you do is you assign each one of the movements that you have. For instance, we use the letter M, and if we push the letter M, we'll get him to start talking.
Actually, my best invention
So what
was
happens now is that
probably
we're
my
going to
unique
actually
system
build in
of
front of you
inventing that
the
included a
ability
team
of what a
skilled
person
and
looks like
talented
as he's
workers,
being programmed.
which I lovingly referred to as
And
my
these are the
muckers.
movements that you're going to
They
see
returned to me
unfold
as
in
the
front of
old
you
man.
as he's
It
being
was with my
programmed
muckers that I
invisibly
took a
by somebody
laboratory approach
backstage.
in inventing back there in Menlo Park,
And you
New
usually
Jersey.
start at the head,
People
and you
eventually
work
called my
down
approach
through
to
the body.
inventing
But the
research
mouth
and
is the most
development.
critical. You get
I
the
just
mouth
refer to
perfect.
it
That could
as
take
my
days
invention
to get the
factory.
mouth exactly right.
A
Once you
reporter
get the
once
mouth,
asked me
then you start
how my
working on the
system of
head
inventing
turns and the
works,
head
and I
nods
replied,
and all the things
"Hell, there are no
that kind of go
rules
along
here.
with it.
We're just trying to accomplish something." But you know, I actually did have a systematic set of rules for innovation. But that,
We said that we
no
would show
rules
you
quote sure
an
made
analog
good
move.
press.
If you can see
I
this
always
little
said
piece
that
right
to have
here,
a great
would be a
idea,
complete
you
analog
had
move.
to
It
have a
allows
lot
the
of it.
robot to stop at
And to
any
invent,
point along the way of
you
a
need a
specific
good
move, where the rest
imagination
are all completely
and a
on
pile
or
of junk.
off.
You know, before I started my research and development laboratory, inventing was thought
We're
of
running
as
out
a
of time now,
random
so we thought we would
process of
end
some lone
with
genius.
2 different quotes.
That's just not so.
The first of which
Anyone
is,
can
love him or
learn
hate him,
from
the man knows
how to be
technology is Bill
creative
Gates.
and
He stated that
innovative. You start
animatronics
by
is where
surrounding
they are
yourself
right
with
now
smart,
is where
talented
computers
people
were 30 years
with
ago. It's
diverse
an incredibly
backgrounds
exciting
who are
time.
willing to work
People are
hard
looking
and
to
long
expand
hours.
on it, a lot of
You know,
mobility, a lot of realism,
opportunity is
and
missed
it's
by
definitely
most
an
people
exciting technological
because
time.
it's dressed in
Another one would be
overalls and
from an
looks
anonymous
like work.
researcher at the University of Minnesota, Dick Swanson. Humans will be marrying robots by 2030, well, if they aren't already
If
right
they are.
now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.